Councilman Full, leading roll, please give the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us bow here. Father God, in the name of Jesus, we thank you. We thank you for another day. We thank you for another opportunity to come to council and to work out the things that need to be done. Lord, we ask that you will continue to bless the mayor, bless the town manager, bless each councilman, that we may do the work together as one to help our country, to help our town, to help our fellow man. Lord, we thank you for what you have done. We thank you for what you're doing right now. But we're dwelling on prosperity for all of us. And we thank you that you give us a mind, you give us an individual thought to help one another. Together. Together we stand, divided we fall. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Be seated. Okay, now we need a motion to, all of you have had a chance to read over the minutes of the last meeting, the special meeting we had on June the 30th and July the 27th.
So moved.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
One change on, so that, June 30th did not list the people attending the meeting. I don't know if that was an oversight or if it's
Thank you, we'll get that, thank you.
okay. Small thing.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Now we have a presentation for Small Town America Civic Volunteerism Award, the Edenton Cares Initiative. Councilman Coleman nominated the Town of Edenton Cares Initiative for a national award sponsored by the Civic Plus, which is a national organization company that assists local governments with web-based communication. Edenton Cares was one of the 100 winning entries. There were 160 entries received, and Councilman Copeland reports that 20 people have volunteered for the Edenton Cares Initiative. And we have invited 3 of those volunteers to represent Edenton Cares here tonight. They are Bill Ahern, Delvin Tatum, and Rebecca Hearn. And welcome to us tonight. We're glad to have you here. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Councilman Coleman to
Thank you, Mayor. Let me say just a little bit about what happened. I think in late March, all of us began to realize that we were facing some serious problems with the coronavirus, and we were having a major impact on the health of our community. With the help of Councilman Miller and I and several others, we put together a plan to try to disseminate information to our residents on how to take care of themselves, where to get information if they had questions, and how to look after their neighbors, how to care for their neighbors. It's called the Neighbor to Neighbor program. And we took on the task of distributing this information along with the red and the green window signs to every household in Edenton. I don't think we had any idea how many households there were in Edenton, some 2,200. Anyway, over a 3-week period, we got most of it. And it was a massive undertaking by a group of volunteers really committed to the safety and health of our community. We have some problems here. We have a lot of older people, more than most communities, a lot of people with diabetes and health problems, and these people are very susceptible to COVID-19. So it was important that we get this information out, and that's the award was for that effort. We've since done some other things. We put up yard signs, we painted out free face masks in housing areas, concentrated housing areas. And now we're beginning to put additional information in stores. Our commitment is to making Edenton as safe a place as possible to live and to visit. And we look forward to working with the town in the coming months to make sure we can do the best we can to provide that kind of safety for our residents. So thank you very much for the award and for the three of you for coming in and representing the Edenton Cares Group. All of you deserve a lot of appreciation from this body here tonight. Thank you.
We have a certificate of appreciation for each one of these three participants that we have ordered here today. Patricia, one for you.
I'm Rebecca.
Rebecca, I'm sorry. Okay, and you, sir?
They're all the same?
They're all the same.
Yeah, no name on, okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And we have one for each of you guys that helped with this
Hey,
initiative.
great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I'm glad Councilman Miller's in such good shape. He would take the second story and I'd take the first story on the party.
Thank you.
Thank you.
guys.
Are we done?
Thank you so much.
Phil, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Bye, Rebecca.
Thank you all for working to keep us safe.
Thank you.
Well, you know, the truth of the matter is that nobody likes wearing these darn things, but without wearing them, we're not being kind to our neighbors, we're not being civic-minded, and we're certainly making some serious mistakes, and I can't for the life of me figure out what the big problem is with wearing them.
And Roger, didn't Bill, wasn't he instrumental in doing the sign drawings?
Yes, all the graphics for us, Bill's done that.
Right.
It's all over town. People admire it.
Great, I'm glad.
Just so they adhere to
I
it.
hope they work, that's the whole
That's the
thing.
whole thing.
Thank
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Anne Marie for that.
All right, at this time, we have a public hearing, and this, the purpose of the public hearing, case number RZ 20-01, is a rezoning application from the Town of Edenton Administration requesting to rezone property located along the south side of Mexico Road from Westview Drive to Pembroke Creek from RA residential to agriculture R20. And due to COVID and limited capacity in council chambers, the council's rules for conducting public hearings during a state of emergency call for council action on matters requiring public hearings be delayed by at least 24 hours to allow for comments to be sent from people watching and listening remotely. Okay? So at this time, I'll call on Elizabeth to present the staff report.
Okay, thank you. And if y'all don't mind, I'll remove my mask while I talk to you so you can hear me more clearly. And Tammy is working on putting some maps and photos, there we go, showing the subject property. And bear with me, the first part of my presentation is going to be very dry. Have to get the staff report read into the record. But just to describe the property real quickly, again, as Mr. Mayor indicated, it is the south side of Mexico Road. So this is Mexico Road, and this is Woodview Drive. It was a typo in the first part. And then Pembroke Creek is this curved line here, and Highway 17 is here. We'll have some more maps that might show it a little bit more clearly in just a minute. The requested action is a rezoning from RA residential agricultural to R20 residential. Again, south side of Mexico Road from Woodview Drive to Pembroke Creek. The existing zoning is RA residential agricultural, and it's primarily single-family residences along Mexico Road here and Bolton's Bridge Lane, and then some larger farm tracts in the rear. To the north, the property is developed. And Tammy, maybe, oh, I can advance, right? Well, there we go. Maybe that'll show us a little bit more. So to the north, the property is similar in nature, but it's zoned R20 residential. You've got some residences along Mexico Road and then large farm tracts and woodland tracts as well. To the east, closer to Highway 32, the property is developed primarily residential between Woodview and Virginia Road. There is some cropland and woodland. To the west, the property is primarily undeveloped woodland. It's zoned RA, residential agricultural. The town of Edenton's spray fields are further up this way. So the existing land use and zoning classifications identified this area as RA, residential agricultural. That district is established as a district in which the principal use of land is for very low density, single-family residential and agricultural purposes, 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. The regulations of this district are intended to protect prime agricultural land from an influx of users likely to render it undesirable to farms and low-density residential development. The minimum lot size is 5 acres. The minimum lot width is 250 feet, and lot coverage is limited to 60%, and building heights are limited to 35 feet. The land use classification is agricultural and residential. Agricultural lands under productive agricultural use for crops or livestock, including accessory buildings and grain storage facilities, may be but are not necessarily taxed under present value. Residential areas dedicated to housing, including single-family, multifamily, mobile, or manufactured homes. So those are the existing land uses identified in this property area. The proposed zoning and land use classification is to R20 residential. The R20 district is established to allow a variety of single-family residential agricultural land uses at a low density of approximately 2.1 dwelling units per acre, which is interspersed with large undeveloped open areas. The minimum lot size is 20,000 square feet. The minimum lot width is 100 feet. Lot coverage is still 60%, and building heights are again 35 feet, limited at 35 feet. It has the same proposed land use category of agricultural and residential. Now moving to the future land use map, classification of the property, plans, and the goals and objectives of that 2018 plan. It classifies this area as conservation along the Pembroke Creek boundary. So our future land use map, which is here, and I'm sorry I couldn't get a more zoomed in picture, but you see the purple star kind of identifies the area in question. This green color is the conservation that follows Pembroke Creek, and then the light yellow color is the low density residential. So the conservation classification occupies almost 14% of the land area in the town's planning jurisdiction and delineates areas where traditional land uses are not desirable or expected to develop. Land development may, however, include public building and facilities necessary to support existing land uses within the area classified as conservation. Moving to the low density portion, which is more this area of the property, a little over half of Edenton's planning jurisdiction is categorized as low density residential by our land use plan. In areas it's primarily to the north and east of downtown. The low density residential classification delineates lands where the predominant land use is low density single family detached dwellings, along with supporting public and institutional land uses. The residential density within this classification ranges from 1 dwelling unit on 5 acres, that's at RA, residential agricultural, up to 3 dwelling units per acre. So even higher than the R20 zoning category. Generally speaking, lands proximate to the US 17 alignment on the eastern and western ends of town are appropriate for the highest residential densities, and areas around the periphery of the town's planning jurisdiction boundary are appropriate for the lowest densities. And our ETJ goes just about right up here. So we are on the periphery. The town of Edenton zoning districts that are compatible with the low density residential classification are the RA, residential agricultural, R40, and R20 residential districts. Cluster development is allowed in the R20 residential district. There's no zoning history on record. I imagine that this is the zoning designation that was given when this area became part of Edenton's extraterritorial jurisdiction. The Unified Development Ordinance, Article 20 on amendments, Article 9 zoning districts and zoning map, Article 12 density and dimensional regulations apply. The property is within the extraterritorial jurisdiction, so municipal water and sewer services are not available, county water, septic tank. It's located within the ETJ, so protection services are generally provided by the Sheriff's Office with cooperation from Edenton Police Department. The property has approximately 3,160 feet of frontage on Mexico Road and on Woodview Drive 531 feet. The physical characteristics of the property are developed lots with single-family residences, which is, again, all along here, and agricultural uses including cropland and woodland. So to move into my staff analysis, the request is to rezone the aforementioned parcels from residential agricultural to R20 residential. The applicant, in this case town staff, seeks this rezoning for the purpose of bringing an area of nonconformity of the zoning map into conformity with the surrounding areas. So I'll pause here to tell you how it came up. We had an individual who has relatives that own one of these parcels here, maybe all three, and wanted to sell 2 acres to him, a nephew, cousin, y'all are somehow related that way. And it's limited to a 5-acre lot size at this time. So if you don't sell or deed 5 acres or more, you're unable to subdivide property in that RA zoning classification, despite all of these non-conforming lots here on Mexico Road and Woodview Drive and Bolton's
Elizabeth?
Bridge Lane.
Listen, so the change would allow more building and development more in line with the existing houses and lots on Mexico Road?
It would allow for subdivisions of less than 5 acres, as small as 20,000 square feet, which is half an acre approximately, but only 3 lots at a time unless it gets conditional use review, and I'll go into that in just a
Do
minute.
you know how big those, how large those lots are?
Most all of them are less than half an acre,
That's
or
okay.
about that.
Okay.
So they're, most likely, many of them will be brought into conformity, but the ones that aren't will be really close, versus now they're obviously nowhere close to 5 acres.
So the 2 houses on an acre, the 2 dwellings on 1 acre, pretty much, is what you're saying?
Well, no, they're individual lots here with
Approximately.
individual
Okay.
homes.
Okay.
The density would be about that,
Okay.
but yes. So when I looked at the zoning map after speaking with Mr. Lawrenson, I realized the incongruency here with just to the north, we've got R20, and these are much larger farm tracts than these here. And then existing subdivided lots as well along Mexico Road, Woodview, and so on further to the east. And it seemed to me just to be an incongruous portion of our zoning map. Perhaps we just extended what was here below 17. I don't really know how it happened. But to bring these lots closer to conformity and then also not burden property owners on this side with a burden not shared by the landowners across the street, it made sense for us to come and ask for the rezoning.
Elizabeth, it looked like most of those homes out there were 1-story brick ranch type homes. I wonder if they were all built at the same time. Did they all look about the same age by the same contractor? I don't know.
When I looked in the,
They're all built by the same person.
yes, I think so, because they're in the tax classification. When I was looking up some information on that, it references a subdivision name. And all of them, so I'm guessing, was it a relative of yours that subdivided the lots?
It was my dad.
Okay.
Was this back in the 60s, sir? Or this
It started in '59.
59? Okay, they look.
Yeah.
It was a farmland that he got from his daddy that was heir to him. And there was a map somewhere that all that parcel, even all the way to the creek on the other side of bypass, was all developed into lots.
But not recorded. So
Now, I don't know if they've been recorded or not, I have nothing to do with all that.
But what did develop were these right here along Mexico Road.
So Liz, I want to make sure I understand. So the proposed change would bring this property in compliance and the same designation as the property right across the street.
Right across the street to the north, and most, you can't see it in this map, but this R20 continues all the way to Highway 32.
And then it would bring the allowable uses more in line with allowable uses on this side of Mexico Road, the existing uses.
They're very similar because R20 is a low-density residential category. So most of the uses that are allowed in RA are actually allowed in R20. There wouldn't be any situation where we'd be rendering something non-conforming by changing from RA to R20.
And one last question. Anything that you are proposing in this proposal would change the conservation designation that you talked about earlier in your presentation?
No, and in
Okay.
fact, that was another point I was going to get to. So subdivisions are limited to 3 lots if it is administratively reviewed and approved. So I can review up to 3 lots in residential districts, not in commercial. All commercial subdivisions come to you all. Any subdivision of 4 or more lots would have to undergo conditional use permit review, which would require a hearing before planning board and town council. At that point, you would examine the land use map and how the proposed development impacted the conservation areas along Pembroke Creek, traffic along Mexico Road, adjoining property all surrounding. That's when you would look at your 4 criteria: public health, safety, welfare. But at this point, because this is a general use rezoning request and not tied to a specific development, you're looking at a much narrower or simpler argument or request. The one thing to keep in mind is that if you rezone from RA, residential agricultural, to R20, residential, all the allowed uses, zone use by right in R20, then become acceptable uses. And as I indicated earlier, there's really not a whole lot of difference between those 2 use categories.
Elizabeth, does the same person own all of that?
No, Mr. Francis owns this parcel that actually joins down here. It's one parcel, but it's separated by the bypass. And then Mr. Adamson, and it's actually your sister, Cartwright, owns these 3 parcels here. The state of North Carolina owns that little sliver there. And then, of course, multiple individuals own all of these lots along Mexico Road.
So, I got a question. So if, I'm more concerned about the creek than anything else. So if they wanted to come in and do 3 lots on the creek, I mean, how close can they get? And then could they just come in
Well,
next
first,
and do 3 more? I mean, I guess that's the,
one main problem they'd have with that is that there's no access. So they're going to have to come, they'd have to have some sort of access from Mexico Road to the creek. So if you're asking about whether they
I
can
mean,
divide
is that whole tract owned by one person?
this one, yes,
Yeah, so-
Cartwright,
And so that doesn't have any access from Mexico Road?
right here.
It has access on where that middle star is, that middle star is a piece of timberland.
Right there.
And there's a path just right where her dot is that goes back there to it. I see, it used to have a name to it, but I don't know what the name is.
Right there.
I mean, I guess that the thing that I'm concerned about a little bit is that, there'd be smaller lots along the creek and they cut, it gets cut down. I mean, that's really my only concern is that
All that woodland there you see that goes against that creek is actually swamp.
And
It falls right off, there's a field there and it falls right off into a swamp.
how far back is it?
I don't know, it's not that far from behind them houses,
the,
but there's enough land, high ground in there to put houses in there.
but remember, you'd also here be served by septic tank. So your lots would have to be large enough to support a septic tank, and if the land is swampy, that means you need more land area. There's one home right in this area, I think, or maybe it's up here, that does abut the creek or have a part, but that's already been subdivided. So hopefully that answered the question. One other item that came up a lot with the property owners affected and then surrounding property owners was a question about how does this affect my tax value? And just as a reminder, tax value is assessed by the use of the property rather than the zoning. So if the property is used for single-family residential, then it has a residential tax classification. If it's used for agricultural production or timber production, then it has an agricultural tax use classification,
No
no matter what the zoning
classification.
is. So you could be zoned highway commercial, and if you're using it as cropland, you're taxed as cropland. That doesn't change unless the use changes. Okay, I'll finish up. So if granted the rezoning of the request, the property owners will continue to have to comply with all of the regulations included within the Town of Edenton's Unified Development Ordinance. This includes requirements for subdivision of lots, building size, building location on the lot, site orientation, water and sewer requirements, and appropriate design for access to the properties from Mexico Road. Staff has determined that the application from the Town of Edenton for a zoning map amendment or rezoning is complete and that it is compatible with the 2018 Edenton-Chowan Land Use Plan in that the rezoning would result in no inconsistency with the existing and future land use classifications of conservation and low-density residential for the subject property, and that it meets the requirements of the Town of Edenton Unified Development Ordinance detailed in Article 20 amendments. The Town of Edenton Planning Board reviewed this application at their November 2nd meeting and unanimously recommended approval.
Elizabeth, did
Yes,
they
sir.
have any concerns?
Some of the same questions came up that we went over tonight about tax valuation. Not much on the conservation and change because they understood fairly clearly that a large subdivision would have to come before them and the town council after that.
And Elizabeth, although this is showing, and you've repeated that the application is coming from the town itself, we're not doing anything against the will of the people that own those.
No, I do believe that we may have someone here tonight that wants to ask for their parcel to be removed from the rezoning request, and that's certainly within your purvey. So if you were to decide to eliminate one of the larger parcels from this rezoning request, that would be within your right. Let me go back to the map. So let's say it's this one.
Hypothetically.
Yeah, hypothetically, you can see that this is actually one large parcel separated by Highway 17.
Right.
So it would be concurrent or congruent with the zoning of the same property across Highway 17. So you could cut that parcel out of the rezoning request and do all the
With your pointer,
rest.
could you outline where that lot goes on the south side of Highway 17 or the town side?
Yes, so it goes all the
So
way
include all of that,
down here, yep.
okay.
Mhm. So
And
it
the
wouldn't be
property
an
owners-
island. I guess is what I was gonna say is, it's not gonna be left an island by itself. It would be, there's more RA to the south.
Okay.
Okay. Happy to answer any other questions.
Anybody else have any questions of Elizabeth while she's up there? Okay, if not, thank you, Elizabeth. And as I stated earlier, because of the COVID conditions, we can't have many people in here, and we probably have some people on Zoom. So we will not be able to make a formal vote and make a formal decision tonight. So we have to give the public 24 hours to comment on this, and they can do that by emailing Ms. Knighton or coming to her office with a written statement on it or whatever, but we cannot vote on it and make a decision tonight. Okay? So, does anybody else have anything they need to say or anything? If not, I'm
Still
gonna
need
close.
to do the public comment or the public hearing.
Okay,
Open that.
we have 3 people here
You can use the gavel, Mayor.
We don't need you. I'll ask if you will, if you're going to speak, please go to the microphone, state your name and where you live, and then state your comments. Ladies first.
Yeah, ladies first.
Hi, I'm Sandy Lawrenson. I'm at 305 Mexico. I'm the one with the 3 parcels. My sister and brother-in-law own it. We're just trying to separate the front part to purchase that to, build a forever home there. And that's all we were trying to do. We're new to the area. This is not something, new people want to come into a small town and start. This was not our intentions. We didn't know how it was rated until we started looking into it and then found out there was an issue at the time. So we just want to separate just 2 acres out of the 3 big lots. It's just in the front. The creek, we're not bothering. As far as I know, I don't see my brother-in-law, my sister selling any more of the property to anywhere else. I mean, the farm gets used, they hire out that, so, but that's it.
What y'all know who I am, but I'm Morgan Francis. I own the parcel that I would request to be taken and left as it is, the one that's across the bypass, and the piece that's where the first star was on the right, which is a 15-acre farm tract. I would like to have them stay as is, not to be rezoned. And as far as what they want to do, I have no problem with what they're doing, or what to do over there, as long as they stay on this side of town. That's all I have to say.
Morgan, I have a question of you, that the street that they named earlier, not the Woodview, but the other one, what was?
It's called Westview.
What?
They had it called, in this map, they had it called as Westview, but it's actually Woodview.
Woodview, is that the one that goes in by your house?
That's right.
Okay.
And there's that road that they're talking about that's on the other side of that piece of woods is actually access to that side. It did have a name to it, but I don't know if it's ever been recorded, and I can't tell you what it is. But most of the property that's on the other side of the bypass, the south side, most of that's timberland anyway, and swamp.
All right, sir, your time.
I have nothing to say. I'm good. She said it all for me.
Oh, okay. All right.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions of either of these people that have spoken? If not, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And as I said earlier, we cannot vote on this tonight. It'll be 24 hours, so I think what we're going to do is leave that till November the 23rd at our regular committee meeting, and we will reconvene at that time. So at this time, I guess we will have to recess this meeting until November the 23rd.
You can do that after you finish the rest of the agenda items.
Okay?
Yep, but we'll remind you to recess
Okay.
the meeting. And did, any council members have any questions? No?
Yes.
Well, you did a good job answering my questions, so.
And the planning board was all unanimous.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You guys can feel free to leave, or you can feel free to stay. It's entirely up to you. If you want to stay, you're more than welcome.
It's better than mine.
Yes. Have a good night, thank you.
See y'all later.
Thank y'all.
Thank
Okay, now we'll go on with our committee meetings. And the first one is our administrative committee chaired by Chairman Becky Hyde.
Thank you, Mayor Stallings. We've got a very short agenda for the administrative committee. It is recommended that council accept the proposal for professional services for our revisions to the UDO to comply with some new statutory provisions contained in North Carolina General Statute 160D. There are some changes that we need to make that are statutorily mandated. The scope of the changes are probably outside our expertise and staff's expertise. And so we come before the full council with that recommendation. I will note two things. We do have sufficient money, first of all, to pay for it, and I think we'll be talking later about where that money's coming from, but I believe we've got some from the land transfer tax fund and also the nuisance revenue fund. Also, Anne Marie has received notice from Dale Holland. Many of us have worked with Mr. Holland in the past. And his company, his existing company, is the company that we were negotiating with for these services. He has informed us that he's in the process of selling his company to a member of his firm that he's going to stay on in a very prominent position, and the other employees are going to stay on. It's basically just a change in the ownership of the firm, and we'll still have his expertise and the firm's expertise, but Ms. Knighton felt like it would be important for us to point that out. Even with that being, I would put it in the form of a motion that we approve the contract with Mr. Holland's existing company, and if we have to do an assignment or fill any paperwork out after the sale of this company, we can do so then. So I put that in the form of a motion.
Second, Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Will he be our main contact too, like he's been in the past? Because he is so great to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll continue to be the lead.
Good.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, our next committee would be Public Works Committee, and that's chaired by Councilman Craig Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. We only have one item. It's recommended the council authorize a no parking zone at the end of the 200 block of East Albemarle Street as presented. Mayor, as discussed in our October 26th committee meeting, the landlord of the Halsey Village residential neighborhood at the very end of the 200 block of East Albemarle Street requested a no parking zone stencil be placed at the end of the street so that younger kids could play basketball on an existing small goal. I would like to put this request in the form of motion, but in this motion I would like to include the addition of a sign designating that area as a basketball goal for these kids. But like I said, I want to put this, request to put this in the form of motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I think Corey knows, those guys know with that little area, they could, not just maybe not a line with a no parking zone, in addition to the line, no parking zone stencil, they could maybe put some diagonal lines and an identifying sign saying what this is.
Just out of curiosity, who owns that property then? I know Percy Halsey did.
He did, and his family, when Mr. Halsey passed away, his family sold the property to Lori Edwards and her husband, who has a different last name. Will Ratchie, yes. And
I would like to add, Mayor, again, they're checking it out several times. There's a large buildup of trash in that area, and I'm kind of afraid some of those kids playing around there could trip and hurt themselves. I think it would be great if the people down there would take a look at that and maybe help clean it up a little bit so these kids don't fall and hurt themselves. I do see quite a bit of trash there.
Lori and her husband have been terrific to work with. We're making slow but steady improvements, and that
Good.
is on our list, working
Great.
on an alternative trash collection plan to help the neighborhood.
And I want to thank again the people who put up the goal. It's a neat little goal, pretty small generation.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those, any more discussion? Okay, if not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried. And under new business, that's all of our committees for tonight, but under a new business, We welcome Gary Hartong, president of the Wooten Company. He's with us on Zoom tonight, and I'll call on Anne Marie to present the amendment to the engineering services contract for the spray field.
Okay. Thanks for being with us, Gary.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And, good evening, Mayor Stallings and the council, and appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you again from Raleigh. Unlike our October 13th meeting, I promise I won't take 45 minutes of your time to dive into great detail about the status of the wastewater collection and treatment plant projects. But I do hope that I cover those projects in sufficient detail to give you some additional foundation for making some important and informed decisions as we move ahead with resolving the town's wastewater issues. What you have in your agenda packets in front of you this evening under new business is amendment number 2 to our engineering services agreement, and these are specifically related to the phase 1 wastewater treatment plant improvements. And this particular amendment covers our path moving forward at the existing wastewater plant. So it covers, while the project is designed and it's in the permitting phase now, the next steps will be moving this project into the advertisement and bidding phase, then into the construction phase. And so this particular amendment covers those bidding services, the construction administration services, and the construction observation services. I think in the particular amendment we call those resident project representative services, and that is the term that is preferred and used by USDA Rural Development. Well, what those services cover is about a 20-month period, beginning next month and really taking us through probably August of 2022, when the treatment plant construction is complete and we're able to start up the new facilities. The total project, or the total amendment amount is $294,000, which brings the phase 1 technical services total to $587,000, and that's roughly 9.5% of the total project cost. And I do want to bring it to your attention that this amendment, or the services listed in this amendment, are covered by the USDA Rural Development funding package that was delivered earlier this year in the late spring. So if it is the council's pleasure, I will be glad to answer any questions or address any comments that you may have about the phase 1 project, or in particular about this amendment.
Anyone have any questions of Mr. Hartzell? Okay. We need a motion, I guess, at this time to,
Going to phase 1, second.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now we need to go into the capital project budget ordinance amendment, improvement to the wastewater treatment plant.
So, Mayor Virginia Smith, our finance officer, prepared an amendment to the capital project budget ordinance that includes this project. And so Virginia has made the amendments that reflect the revenue that's anticipated coming in from the grant and loan from USDA, and then added those expenditure line items that Gary mentioned will be utilized as we move forward.
Okay.
And I'll just mention, I put it in my report to you all, but once we get approval from the state and the project is put out to bid, when we get bids in hand, then we go to the LGC to get approval for financing the project with USDA. So
This is very similar to our water treatment plants.
that same
in the past,
process,
same
yes.
process.
I did a bid for the spray fields.
What's that?
I did a bid for the spray fields.
And we're, it's my understanding, once they get into the I guess construction phase, that those trees out there will eventually be eliminated, is that,
Yeah, Gary can address that, but yes.
will the trees be eliminated out there at the spray fields at some point in time?
Yeah, that is the intent, is to phase out the trees and replace that with a grass that will be maintained by the town. Throughout the years, the trees have had a variety of issues just due to the amount of water being sprayed upon them. Some of them have just died from overwatering, others have become diseased. So the long-term intent is to go out there back with a grass that will be mowable by the town's operational staff, and hopefully prevent some of those problems, those ponding problems that the town is experiencing now.
Do most municipalities have grass in lieu of trees like we do?
I would say there's a combination of both. Some municipalities have grass, some municipalities have trees, some municipalities have a combination of the two. It really depends when and how they were constructed, and based on a number of conditions, including the groundwater level, the soil conditions, and other environmental factors that affect what the best vegetative crop is for the spray field.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other questions pertaining to the capital project, the budget ordinance amendment or improvements to the wastewater treatment plant? Any further discussion or questions with Mr. Hartzog or Ms. Knight?
Do you need a motion on the amendment?
Need a
So
motion.
moved, so moved on the amendment, budget amendment.
We have a motion, need a second? Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you. As always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, that's gonna be a big operation out there once it gets started. I mean, that's a lot of acreage out there.
I hope we don't get into the problems they got into, but of course I was not on it, I don't think anybody else was on the council at the time when they originally built that thing out there, but I remember it well, so, anyway.
Was that back in the '70s maybe, or '60s?
Yeah, it was in the seventies.
I worked at the first one in college.
You worked out at.
Yeah, I worked at, yeah,
Did you?
the worst job I've ever had.
You say it was in the eighties, was it the eighties?
The new, well, we call it the new, the existing wastewater treatment plant went online about 1988.
Okay.
But the one that Sambo worked at, that was built, I think, when the Marines were
Yeah,
there.
that was in Cape
Probably
Cod.
in the 60s.
Yeah.
Okay,
I moved over some ground beans.
Okay, the next one, thing on our agenda is the budget amendment for the police department and planning department. Emery, you wanna take that?
Sure, Mayor, we have two budget amendments pertaining to the general fund for you tonight. Virginia Smith prepared a budget amendment to reflect revenue that has been received from the sale of firearms. And remember, you reviewed and approved a plan that Chief King submitted to upgrade and get rid of some of our older weapons. So that budget amendment is prepared for your consideration. And then this afternoon, we sent you the budget amendment that Councilman High referred to earlier that would add revenue to pay for the professional services that are going to be required to update the Unified Development Ordinance. And we're happy to report that our first quarter land transfer tax proceeds are running higher than what we budgeted. And then also nuisance revenue also is coming in higher than what we budgeted. And I have to give a shout out to the fire chief and to Public Works, but I think really the nuisance revenue is a combination of the work, the good work that Elizabeth and our nuisance code enforcement officer Stacy Williams are doing, But then also, when the fire department has been burning dilapidated structures, the cost of cleaning up the lot is assessed to the property owner, and Public Works has been cleaning up that work and billing the property owner, and so that's additional revenue that we've received, so we appreciate that. But those two budget amendments, I'm happy to answer questions, or Virginia can answer any questions as well.
Does anyone have any questions or comments to Ms. Knighton on that? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion.
I'm moving that we approve budget amendments to the police department and the planning department.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, that moves us to the public comment section. I guess we have anybody in here to,
I think I got time to important matters.
I'm sorry?
Time to important matters.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Any of you guys up here have anything?
I got one. Ms. Knighton, the question that's been asked to me, when are we gonna start paving?
Hopefully sometime later this month. The contract, Barnhill sent their contracts to the engineer today. They were supposed to be received by the Wooten Company today in Greenville, and Derek is doing his review of the contracts, and then he's gonna overnight them to Hood Ellis, to the town attorney, because he has to approve them, and hopefully we'll get them either Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday for the mayor to sign. And then Barnhill, their plan is to begin mobilizing next week. They have to do some concrete work first, replace some curb and gutter.
That over Stratford and Hawthorne.
Yes,
Okay.
where, and then also Corey wants them to do some curb and gutter, really concrete work around the catch basin. So they've gotta do that first, and then they'll start paving, but it's imminent, it's coming soon.
Do you think they'll start over there at Hawthorne and Stratford, or do you know?
We asked them to start at,
They've been waiting so long, I know, the streets been torn up so long.
we did ask them to start at Hawthorne, Stratford, and Battle Road in Second.
Is it too late because I'm getting a lot of complaints about Oakdale Drive as you get down by the dentist's office and the little things where you got those big holes in the road and.
Oakdale is on
Not
the
Oakdale.
list. Oh,
Coke Avenue.
Coke Avenue is a state road, so we can talk to DOT. I don't think that's on their list to pave this spring, but I can find out. But they've gotta do some, I noticed that when I left the other night, that they've gotta do some
It's real bad.
filling on Coke Avenue, some
So
potholes.
that's a state road?
Coke Avenue is a state road,
And
but Oakdale Drive is on the list to be paved
Yeah.
this time
And
around.
top of that state road, right there at the intersection of Granville and Martin Luther King, as you're going down Martin Luther King, almost to Mosley, that's bad, but that's a state road too.
So is North Broad, isn't it? That's state as well, because that's in pretty bad shape as well.
But we can only, patch so much, is that correct, Emery? I mean, we can only
Is there any reason why?
asphalt patch so much
On,
on state roads. Do we patch
if
any?
it gets real, I don't want the state to hear this, but if it gets really bad, we'll do it.
I see
but-
some patching in Granville.
So
Is Granville state?
the town is responsible for South Granville Street,
South.
so that's, is it at, it's either at Church or Queen, I'm sorry, it's at Queen, so south of Queen Street is the town's responsibility, north of Queen Street on Granville is the state's responsibility. But if we did a utility cut, if we cut, then we're responsible for the patch. But I'll find out about Coke Avenue and
Okay.
ask them. I don't think that's on the list. The last time I checked, I know that Martin Luther King was supposed to be on the list for either next, this coming spring or the fall. And then they are definitely gonna do NC 32 north, but that doesn't really help us in
Andrew,
town.
while we're talking about paving, just looking ahead in the future, do you feel we can go into a phase 3 situation next year? To look at some other roads that
Yeah,
not,
we'll ask Corey to do an assessment as
Okay.
part of the budget for 21, 22.
The public works know that right there at Dillon's Creek, they worked on that fire hydrant, they dug it up three years ago. And now, the people turn in there, you got 2 deep holes and they keep getting deeper and deeper.
Corey's not on the call tonight. He was working on a problem, infrastructure problem, but I will talk to him tomorrow about that. So it's where the water, where the fire hydrant was
Yeah.
repaired at the corner of Dillard and Paradise.
Right.
Okay.
okay.
Thank
Yes.
you.
I just want to say something positive about the Queen Anne Creek bulkhead project. Looks like it's coming along pretty good, and I'm sure that storm sewer pipe issue has been resolved.
Almost.
Almost, okay.
I don't think it'll be resolved for all this rain that's coming in. They were working on it all week long.
And I know it was tough for the people who live in that area, all that construction going on, but it's gonna be great.
That rail that they put there really looks nice.
Yeah.
New railing.
Yeah, looks nice.
My wife keep asking about a report about the second grocery store. Every council meeting we have.
We are continuing to work hard. We're hoping to hear something in the next couple of weeks about, where the developer and the grocer that's talking, how close are they to be able to make a deal, and then what incentives will we be able to offer?
Right.
So we're working hard every day, and
And Marie, is Edenton Joint Partnership been very much involved in this too?
Liza has been
Great.
fantastic.
Great.
And I think it's important to note that right now, a lot of things are out of our control because it's between the grocery store owner and the developer or the owner of the shopping center. And also certain things cannot be repeated in public, so I don't think anybody's trying to hide the ball or anything. Things are moving forward. And I know we get tired of hearing that, but
We're closer than we've ever been.
yeah.
So we're cautiously optimistic.
I don't want to say that at this
Okay.
point, because they've got a lot of work to do to figure out how to make it work, so.
All right, does anyone else have anything to bring up before the council? If not, that completes our agenda, and I'll need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Have a motion and a second?
Oh, Mayor,
Oops, I'm-
thank you, Tammy. You need
Wait a
to
minute, time out. We
recess.
can't
Yes.
adjourn the meeting, we can only recess the meeting.
Thank you, Tammy.
I thought about that second. We can only recess the meeting until November the 23rd at our regular committee meeting, and then we will reconvene this meeting.
So you need a motion to to recess, please.
Okay,
I make a motion to recess the meeting.
okay. So a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify. I'll say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. We are dismissed.
That's recess to the 23rd.
Okay, I'm going to read this.
All right.